Hello and welcome to Go-To Tech Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at another evolution of our home theater PC with another case. Now if you remember, we started out with the Thermaltake Core V21. Now that was actually a Micro-ITX case, even though we did a Mini-ITX build in it, so it was kind of large for what it was. We then transferred everything over to the Fractal Design Define Nano S, which was a fantastic case, but the problem was with an air-cooled GPU, it tends to get kind of choked out by the power supply there on the bottom. That case is actually more designed towards Mini-ITX water cooling builds for that reason. Now we wanted to do the spiritual successor of the Mini-ITX version of the Core V21, which is the Core V1, and this is the more stealthy, less cheese gratery looking Thermaltake Suppressor F1. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features, and I've already transferred everything over from the previous build, and we have that video in here as well. Suppressor F1 is a multi-chamber Mini-ITX cube design and an evolution of the Thermaltake Core V1, but with a cleaner aesthetic and some additional upgrades. Its dimensions are 276 by 260 by 319 millimeters. Much like its predecessors, the Core V21 and Core V1, all sides of the case are the same size and can be swapped with any of the other sides. Each panel has 2 thumb screws, but I would have preferred to see retainable thumb screws here, but that's just a personal preference. One thing to note is that the panels are a little on the flimsy side, making them a little trickier to mount than I would have liked. This isn't a huge deal given the price of the case, it's just one of those things you come to appreciate when the case looks and feels sturdy. One of the biggest improvements over the Core V1 are the much welcome magnetic dust filters. This was one of the major problems with the Core V1, which made it a terrible dust magnet. This simple change goes a long way, and I like that Thermaltake is listening to its customers on making continual improvements. The only windowed panel is situated at the top and is my recommended place to keep it. If it is used to show off the GPU on the left side, then that will restrict airflow to the GPU. You could have it on the other side without hampering airflow, but it would look silly in my opinion. The bottom panel hosts a removable dust filter for the power supply, as well as sporting large rubber feet to allow the power supply breathing room. The removable bottom panel could technically be swapped with any other panel. However, this one is designed specifically to be placed underneath the power supply, and the rubber feet are non-swappable. On the right side are 2 large brackets that allow for one 3.5 inch and one 2.5 inch drive each. It should be noted that these are rather difficult to maneuver as they snap in and out of place and require some force. I like the floating mount of the V21 much better and would have liked to have seen something easier like that implemented here. The rear panel shows support for a standard ATX power supply, 2 PCIe slots, and 2 80mm exhaust fan mounts. The front has the standard fare of I/O, including power and reset buttons, activity LEDs, 2 USB 3.0 or 3.1 Gen 1 ports, as well as headphone and microphone jacks. The 2-chamber design allows for isolation of components, where the bottom chamber largely contains the power supply and the majority of cable management. The motherboard, CPU, RAM, GPU, and cooler all sit in the top chamber. A hole in the bottom of the front panel makes removing the front panel much easier. I didn't realize this until after I had shot myself struggling to remove the front panel from the top. The front panel has a plastic faux brushed aluminum look and ventilation not too dissimilar from the Fractal Design front panels. The difference here is the filter is built into the side ventilation instead of a removable filter on the inside. One other thing to keep in mind is that you will want to install the CPU cooler before the power supply, especially if it has a backplate. Otherwise you will have to remove the power supply to install it. I also appreciate the large cutout here for the CPU cooler backplate installation. It just makes it a lot easier for access purposes. Finally, for front intake cooling, you can mount a 200mm, which is included, 140mm or 120mm fan. Likewise, you can install either a 120mm or 140mm radiator. I have seen others on the internet, on the V1 as well, install the radiator behind the 200mm intake for a sort of push-pull effect. Earlier I mentioned how I moved to this case over the Fractal Design Define Nano S due to the air-cooled GPU being choked by the power supply. This shows the first GPU fan being completely blocked by the power supply and not allowing it to cool properly. Keep that in mind that the Define Nano S is targeted more for Mini-ITX water-cooled builds for this reason. The Thermaltake Suppressor F1 allows much better breathing room due to the two-compartment design and will keep air-cooled GPUs cooler. Okay, so that wraps it up for the Thermaltake Suppressor F1. The things that I really like about it are the clean aesthetics, the ease of use to build in, and the overall feature set. Having a massive 200mm fan up front is really good. There's just a lot of room to build in it, and it was really easy and pleasant to build in. And you know, sometimes it's hard to kind of quantify on reviews like this, but you know, of all the builds that I've done, this was by far one of the funnest and most gratifying. So anyways, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for some more content. I publish every weekend, and we will catch you next week, and thanks for watching.